Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Just Law on IQRA TV. I'm your host Ilyas Bulbulia and I'll be with you for the next hour. As our regular viewers are aware, on Just Law we normally discuss an area of law which is of interest to you, our viewers. And secondly, more importantly, Just Law is a live show. So whatever questions that you have on any aspect of English law, please feel free to pick up your phone and give me a ring, and hopefully I should be able to give you some advice, some guidance in relation to those matters. On this show, I should be able to cover most areas of English law, matters ranging from immigration law matters, family law matters, personal injury matters. So whatever your questions are, as long as they relate to English legal law matters, please feel free to pick up the phone and give me a ring. Just a couple of short points before we get going. Obviously on a live show, it's not possible to take very detailed information from callers who call in. If it transpires that I need to speak to you in detail, I'll ask you to leave your number with the control room and then I will give you a ring off air. Secondly, sometimes matters are complicated. You need to look at documents before you advise further. And if it transpires that I need to look at your documents before I can advise you, again, I will make arrangements for you to call me off air and to send me the documents so I can look at the documents and advise you thereafter. But in my experience, whatever your questions are, when people do call in, I am able to deal with the vast majority of those matters live on air. Now, as always, we have a topic which is topical, which is of interest to you, our viewers, and normally an area of law which generates the vast majority of questions. So last week we started looking at how somebody can make a successful spouse application to come to the United Kingdom. Now I want to carry on with that theme and look at one of the key aspects of spouse applications, which is the financial requirement. So I'll just recap very quickly as to what we looked at last week, then I want to move on to looking at the financial requirement, which in reality generates the vast majority of questions, even in practice and even on this show. How do you meet the financial requirement when you want to sponsor your husband or wife who's abroad, you want to sponsor them to come to the United Kingdom? How do we deal with this financial requirement, which seems to be causing a lot of problems for a lot of people? But although we're looking at that today in detail, even if your question relates to other matters, please feel free to pick up the phone and give us a ring on the number that appears at the bottom of your screen. So we looked at last week, we started looking at spouse applications. So you have an individual here who's got married abroad. They want to sponsor their husband or wife to come to the United Kingdom. That may well be from Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, or indeed from any other country. The reality is that the rules which apply when you want to sponsor somebody to come to the United Kingdom as a wife, as a husband, are more or less the same, irrespective of which country they come from. There are minor differences, but on the whole, the rules which have to be satisfied are the same, irrespective of whether somebody is coming from Asia, South Asia, typically Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, or whether they're coming from the United Kingdom or New Zealand or some other country. The vast majority of the requirements that need to be fulfilled will be identical. There are some insignificant differences, such as, for example, if you come from certain countries, you may not need to demonstrate that you are proficient in the English language because it's assumed you are. For example, if you're coming from New Zealand, it's assumed that because you're coming from an English-speaking country, you're proficient in that language. So not a problem there. Most countries require you to submit a TB test, subject yourself to a test for screening whether you have TB or not. Certain Western countries where it's assumed that there is no problem with no medical problems relating to TB, you may not be required to do a TB test. But apart from those two exceptions, the rules are the same, irrespective of where your husband or wife is applying from. It's no easier to apply from a Western country than it is to apply from a country in Asia, South Asia, for example. We looked at the main requirements last week. We had a brief overview. What I want to look at is the financial requirement. Now, those of us who've been practicing for a long time will remember the days when there was no financial limit as such in the same way that we have nowadays. Previously, you only had to demonstrate that you would be earning enough money, earning enough not to be a burden on the state, and potentially in those days, somebody who's earning in the region of £600 a month, £700 a month, would be earning sufficient money to be able to sponsor their husband or wife to come to the United Kingdom. That all changed in 2012 with the new immigration rules coming in. One of the major changes that came in 2012 was this requirement that in most cases, there are exceptions, in most cases the sponsor needs to be earning 18,600 per annum. So it's a big shift from what it was before, where in the vast majority of cases sponsors simply needed to earn about £600, £600 a month. Big shift from that to where we are now, which is that the sponsor needs to be earning 18,600 per annum. So if you think about it, when we had the much easier test to satisfy of not being able to look after your partner in the United Kingdom without recourse to public funds, earning simply £500-600 a month, the vast majority of people who work would be able to satisfy that requirement. Even those working on a part-time basis, maybe just 20 hours a week, would be earning sufficient money to be able to meet that requirement. But now the reality is, even if somebody is working full-time, working 40 hours a week, even then it's possible that because the national minimum wage is still low, even if somebody is working 40 hours a week, won't meet the financial requirement. Currently, if you're trying to meet the 18,600 requirement and you're receiving the national minimum wage, you're over the age of, as an adult, over the age of 25 or over, receiving the national minimum wage, even now, with the national minimum wage, you still have to be working 44 hours a week. That's somebody who's 25 or over on the higher rate of £8.21 per hour. Even that person needs to be working 44 hours a week in order to meet the requirement. Now, the problem at the moment is a lot of people won't be working 44 hours a week. Their working week may be 37 hours a week, 37 and a half hours a week, and they may just be paid for that. They may be getting unpaid lunch breaks, etc. But the actual working week may well just be 37 hours a week, 37 and a half hours a week. The problem is that if that's the case, they won't meet the 18,600 requirement. The other problem is, obviously a lot of people getting married are quite young. They may be 20, 21, 22 years old. So the national minimum wage for them is much lower. It won't be at the £8.21 rate. It's going to be significantly lower. Now, if it's lower, it means that even if they work 44 hours a week, they still won't meet the requirement. They need to work significantly more hours because their hourly rate is low. So that again causes problems, and it may well be that somebody who's 21, 22 years old actually has to work 50, 55 hours a week to meet the requirement, which is not always possible. There may not be those kind of hours available at the place where the person is working. So significant problems with the new rules which came in 2012. We've now been dealing with the new rules for the last 7 years. And obviously, now that 7 years have passed, we're all very familiar as to how the rules work, how they're interpreted, what the Home Office look for when evidence of the financial requirement is submitted, where things go wrong. And what I want to do is just go through the rules and highlight and give you some tips in terms of what you need to bear in mind in order to make a successful application, particularly in relation to this spouse immigration application, where you need to be earning 18,600 per annum. Okay, starting point, generally speaking, you need to be earning 18,600 per annum. There are some exceptions to that, and we won't have time today to look at the exceptions, but there are exceptions. You may fall outside the 18,600 requirement. For example, if you are receiving certain disability benefits, such as if you're receiving PIP, disability living allowance, severe disablement allowance, or if you're caring for somebody who has a disability and you're receiving carers allowance because you're caring for somebody who's got disability. Now, if that's the case, the 18,600 rule doesn't apply to you at all. There are completely different rules which apply in that situation. So you always need to look at whether you fall within the exemption or not. If you fall within the exemption, you won't need to show 18,600 at all. But today we want to look at those who fall within the 18,600 per annum rule. What do they need to do? Well, although the rule says you need to be earning 18,600 per annum, it doesn't mean that you need to have earned that amount of money for the whole year. So if you are applying now, let's say you're applying end of September, beginning of October, it doesn't mean that you need to submit evidence from October 2018 to September 2019, showing that you've earned 18,600 for the duration of the last 12 months. You don't need to do that. 18,600 per annum isn't assessed necessarily over a 12-month period. It is, in most cases, assessed over the last 6 months. So if you have, for example, somebody who is applying now, let's say in October 2019, what you're doing is demonstrating that the sponsor has earned at the level of 18,600 for the last 6 months. So you would be submitting documentary evidence which cover the last 6 months, which would be May, June, July, April, May, June, July, August, September. Those would be the last 6 months if you're applying in October. You wouldn't need to go back to last year. So it's only the last 6 months in the vast majority of cases that you need to look to. Now, so let's take, for example, somebody who started work in January 2019. And at that stage, they were due, and they were only receiving a salary of £15,000 per annum. So January, February, March, they were simply receiving £15,000 per annum. But come April, they managed to get an increase in their pay, and their salary, let's say, for example, has now gone up to £19,000 per annum. They would meet the requirements, even though in January 2019, they weren't meeting the 18,600 requirement, but because in the last 6 months the salary has gone up, they're now at that 18,600 pounds per annum. So in the example we gave, the person gets a salary increase to 19,000 pounds in April, May, June, July, August, September. We've got 6 months of wage slips where the person is earning above the 18,600 pound threshold. So they're okay. They would meet the requirement at that stage. So it's not mandatory, it's not essential that somebody needs to have earned that level of income for the duration of 12 months. So that's the starting point. We are, to some extent, unless you fall within the exemption, stuck with the requirement of earning 18,600 per annum to sponsor your husband or wife to come to the United Kingdom. So that's the requirement. How do you demonstrate that you're earning 18,600 per annum? In the most simplest of cases, that is demonstrated by submitting wage slips, by submitting bank statements, and an employment letter. We'll look at more complicated cases later on, but if you're sponsoring your husband and wife to come to the United Kingdom, and you're trying to meet this requirement, the easiest way is to rely on the previous 6 months and to really focus on these three documentary pieces of documentary evidence that the Home Office wants: wage slips, your bank statements, and your employment letter. They're the three key documents: wage slips, bank statements, and the employment letter. There are other documents that you can submit to bolster your case, such as your P60 or your contract of employment, but they are not mandatory documents. They are not really taken into account. You must simply look at these three documents. The problem is that in practice, you see that before we go into this in detail, let's take our next call. Hello, Assalamu alaikum.
वालेकुम सलाम।
जी भाई, जी थैंक यू फॉर कॉलिंग। जी भाई, आपका क्वेश्चन क्या है?
हेलो, अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
जी वालेकुम सलाम। जी, व्हाट्स योर क्वेश्चन ब्रदर? जी, if you turn your I think you've got your TV on. If you turn the volume down, or if you move away please from the TV, should be able to hear you. Okay. Hello, अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
वालेकुम सलाम। मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि मैं यूरोपीय नेशनल हूँ और मेरा भाई जो है मेरे डिपेंडेंट 6 मंथ के वीजे पे इधर आया है।
ओके।
तो हमने उसका एक्सटेंशन के लिए अप्लाई किया है, 2 मंथ हो गए हैं।
ओके ओके।
उसका बायोमेट्रिक भी हो गया है और साथ ही बायोमेट्रिक के साथ ही उन्होंने एक और लेटर भेजा, एप्लीकेशन जो सर्टिफिकेट होता है,
COA, सर्टिफिकेट ऑफ एप्लीकेशन,
की परमिशन नहीं दी
जी।
तो ये नॉर्मल बायोमेट्रिक के बाद कितना टाइम लगता है इस एप्लीकेशन को?
जी, तो आपका ब्रदर जो आया है ना, वो एक्सटेंडेड फैमिली मेंबर पाया है?
यस,
एक्सटेंडेड। सी, नॉर्मल जो एप्लीकेशन है ना, जो इमीडिएट फैमिली मेंबर्स जैसे पेरेंट्स, ग्रैंड पेरेंट्स, चिल्ड्रन एंड ग्रैंड चिल्ड्रन, उसका जो केसेस है ना, वो तो अभी डिसाइड हो रहे हैं विद इन अबाउट 2 वीक्स। बस इतना ही टाइम लगता है, विद इन अबाउट 2 वीक्स ये केसेस डिसाइड होते हैं। आपका केस थोड़ा सा डिफरेंट है, वो एक्सटेंडेड फैमिली मेंबर का केस है। तो इसमें भी आई थिंक इसमें प्रॉब्लम, आई डोंट नो व्हाट द इशू इज। अगर एक बार उसने वीज़ा दे दिया, फैमिली परमिट इशू कर दी, तो देयर इज नथिंग टू चेक नाउ, उसको दे देना चाहिए अभी स्ट्रेट अवे विद इन 2 वीक्स। मैंने अभी देखा है कि इन द लास्ट फ्यू मंथ्स काफ़ी लोग को ये एक्सटेंडेड फैमिली मेंबर पे उसने वीज़ा देना शुरू किया है without really checking the cases. उसने family permits issue कर दी. Now, really normal processing time is about 2 weeks ये cases के लिए. But I think because ये brother का case है, it's an extended family member case, I think that's why उसको उस थोड़ा से detail में देख रहे हैं. But even then, it shouldn't take more than 2 months. It shouldn't. आप सिर्फ the only thing you can do, इसके जो EU की जो टेलीफोन नंबर है ना, वो केस वर्क रेजोल्यूशन यूनिट, आप सिर्फ उसको फ़ोन कर सकते हैं और आपको बताएंगे कि आपका केस कहाँ तक पहुँचा है, क्यों स्टक हो गया है। अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट,
लेकिन वो उन्होंने 6 मंथ का टाइम दिया हुआ है।
हाँ, नॉर्मली इतना लॉन्ग नहीं लगता है, इट्स नॉट टेकन। जो मोस्ट केसेस है ना, विद इन 2 वीक्स वो हो जाते हैं। मगर ये है ना कि अगर वो कहते हैं कि वेट करो, तो आपको वेट ही करना पड़ेगा अभी तो। और तो क्या करें, प्रॉब्लम ये है ना। सो बेस्ट आप वेट करो, और ये जो उसका कॉन्टैक्ट नंबर है EU केस वर्क रेजोल्यूशन यूनिट का, आप उसको फ़ोन करते रहो एवरी मंथ फॉर एन अपडेट। जी, थैंक यू जज़ाकल्लाह, थैंक यू वेरी मच आपका कॉल के लिए। The problem at the moment with the Home Office, and whether it's an EU case or whether it's some other case, the problem with the Home Office is when there is a delay in processing applications. Unfortunately, there's nothing that you can do apart from to wait. They don't respond really to phone calls, they don't respond to emails, they don't respond to letters. Even if you get an MP to write on your behalf, the response to the MP simply is that there's a lot of cases being dealt with, it is being processed, the applicant must wait. So to some extent, when there is a delay on the part of the Home Office, there simply isn't anything that you can do. You simply have to wait. Even your lawyers can't do anything. the reality is the MP, even if you get the MP involved, the MP can't do anything. You just simply have to wait. And with the Home Office, when they turn around and say it's going to take 5 or 6 months, for them, that's just normal processing times, I'm afraid. Nowadays, people expect things to happen in the matter of days, if not within weeks. But the Home Office still, unfortunately, works on a rather different time scale. They work still in months. So even a straightforward application, leaving the EU settlement cases to one side, even the straightforward cases take in the region of 2 to 3 months to decide. So unfortunately, all that can be done is for the person to sit and wait until a decision is made. Going back to what we were discussing before we took that call, where somebody's in the United Kingdom, they want to sponsor their husband or wife to come to the United Kingdom, specifically looking at the financial requirement. And what I was saying was that the key documents you need to look at when you're looking at this financial requirement that needs to be met, 18,600 per annum, the key document that you need to look at, or the key documents you need to look at, are threefold. You need your wage slips, your bank statements, and your employer's letter. Sounds simple, but it's surprising how many times something as simple as that actually leads to a refusal. Because the problem is, with each of those documents, there are very specific rules about what the Home Office wants. So let's go through some of these. So, hopefully there'll be useful tips for anybody who's looking at sponsoring their husband or wife to come to the United Kingdom. So let's start with wage slips. Now, as I said at the outset, the Home Office assesses your financial income in most cases, there are exceptions, in most cases over the last 6 months. They don't necessarily look at your income over 12 months. So it therefore follows that they'll want 6 months wage slips. So if you're getting paid monthly, it would be wage slips for 6 months. If you're getting paid weekly, it would be wage slips for the last 26 weeks. If you're getting paid on a 4-weekly basis, the rules are slightly different. When we come back from our break, we'll look at this in greater detail. We'll be back in the next few minutes.